My name is Amira. At least, that was my name until my encounter with Jesus, my Savior. I was born into one of the wealthiest royal families in the Middle East, which I would rather not mention for some personal reasons. My father is a powerful emir, respected and feared. My mother is the picture of grace and religious devotion. From the day I was born, my path was already written, at least, that's what everyone believed. I grew up surrounded by luxury, gold-lined furniture, sparkling fountains, private gardens, and an endless line of maids and tutors. My meals were served on silver trays, my clothes handmade by the finest designers, and my face hidden from the world behind an embroidered veil. Many would say I had everything: riches, honor, and beauty. But deep inside, I carried a quiet emptiness, a silence I couldn't explain. From a young age, I was taught that a woman's place was in the shadows, obedient, unseen, and unquestioning. I memorized the Quran, attended religious classes, and followed the rules with a quiet smile. But behind the palace gates, behind the veil, I was just a girl who longed to be truly known, and truly free. I never imagined that one day, my life would change forever. That one day, I would walk away from everything I had ever known, not just my title, my family, or my name, but the religion I was born into. This is the story of how I met Jesus. How he called me out of darkness, how he gave me a new name, Christabel, and how that one encounter would cost me everything, but give me far more in return. I was born in the year 2002, in the heart of a desert kingdom whose name, like I said earlier, won't mention, not to protect myself, but to protect those still living under its shadow. From the moment I arrived into this world, I was royalty. My birth was celebrated with golden sweets, silver trays, and blessings whispered over my crib by religious leaders and tribal elders. I was the daughter of an emir, a powerful man whose decisions shaped the economy, religion, and politics of our region. My mother, his first wife, was known not just for her beauty, but for her deep devotion to Islam. Growing up, our palace was my entire world. It stretched like a fortress across acres of desert, surrounded by thick walls and guarded gates. Outside those walls, the world moved on in noise and color, but I only knew the sound of fountains trickling in marble courtyards, the scent of expensive oud in the hallways, and the softness of Persian carpets beneath my feet. My bedroom ceiling was painted like the night sky, and a servant always stood silently in the corner, ready to respond to the snap of my fingers. I was taught to speak only when spoken to. My tutors, always female, always modest, trained me in classical Arabic, English, mathematics, poetry, and, most importantly, the Quran. Religion wasn't just a part of our life, it was our life. We prayed 5 times a day, facing Mecca. Every word I said, every move I made, was expected to reflect honor upon my family and obedience to Allah. By the age of 7, I had memorized more verses of the Quran than I had fairy tales. My hands were often henna-stained for religious ceremonies, and I wore the veil before I even understood what modesty meant. I was taught that the veil was my protection, my shield of dignity. A woman's beauty is her honor, my mother would say. And honor must be guarded at all costs. But as I grew older, that veil started to feel less like protection and more like a barrier. I was never allowed to leave the palace unescorted. Even inside our compound, male relatives, uncles, cousins, even brothers, had limited interaction with me once I reached puberty. Stay hidden, I was told. Stay pure. I didn't know what the world looked like beyond the palace walls. I only saw glimpses of it in news reports that were carefully filtered, or through the tinted glass of bulletproof cars when we drove to the family's private mosque. My days were scheduled to the minute. After dawn prayer, I had Quran recitation. Then Arabic literature, Islamic history, embroidery lessons, and sometimes music, though only certain instruments were allowed. We were never permitted to watch Western movies or listen to popular music. Anything considered haram or Western influence was forbidden. Even books were vetted. I read about queens and desert roses, but never about Cinderella or Anne Frank or women who made their own choices. Despite the lavishness, there was a deep, unspoken loneliness in my soul. At night, I would lie in my grand bed beneath silk sheets and wonder if there was more to life than this golden cage. I remember pressing my hand against the cool glass of my bedroom window, watching the stars, wondering if freedom existed somewhere beyond those walls. People envied me. They saw my jewels, my titles, the way servants bowed when I passed. They didn't see how I cried quietly into my pillow when the lights were off. They didn't hear the silence that followed me like a shadow. I was surrounded by people, but I felt completely alone. Sometimes, I would write little notes to myself and hide them under my prayer mat, just thoughts, questions I dared not ask aloud. Is this all there is? Does God hear me? Why do I feel so unseen? I never imagined, in those days, that I was being watched, not by guards or teachers, but by someone far greater, far more loving than I could ever imagine. My name was Amira. It means princess. But despite the silks, the power, and the titles, I didn't feel like one. I felt like a bird born in a cage too beautiful to escape, but still a cage. Little did I know, a door was about to open, one that no guard could close, and no father could control. Almost unnoticeably. Like a whisper against the roar of tradition. I was 17 when the palace hired a new English and art tutor. Her name was Elena. She was in her mid-30s, modestly dressed, polite, and precise with her language. She wasn't Arab. She spoke with a slight European accent, British, perhaps? I never asked. All I knew was that she carried herself with a calm grace. Unlike most of the other staff, she didn't lower her eyes in submission or hurry her words. She spoke to me, not just at me. And that felt strange. But comforting. One afternoon, during a vocabulary lesson, I noticed something around her neck, a tiny silver pendant. I had never seen jewelry like that before. It was shaped like a cross. Simple, almost delicate. I leaned in slightly and asked, "What is that symbol you wear?" She paused. I could see hesitation in her eyes. Then she said softly, "It's a cross. I'm a Christian." My heart began to race. A Christian? That word had always been spoken with disdain in our household. Christians were outsiders. Lost. Misguided. Pitted. I had never met one in person, at least, not knowingly. And now here she was, sitting across from me, calm and full of peace. I nodded, pretending not to care, but inside, something stirred. I had so many questions, but I was terrified to ask. Days passed. The image of the cross lingered in my mind like an echo I couldn't silence. Eventually, I gathered the courage. We were sketching a desert landscape in one of the palace courtyards when I asked, "Why do Christians wear that?" The cross? Elena looked at me carefully. She put down her pencil. "For us," she said gently, "the cross reminds us of the greatest love the world has ever known." Love? I repeated. From God? Yes, she said. Through his son, Jesus. I remember feeling a chill. The name Jesus was not unfamiliar, but only as a prophet, Isa in Arabic, not as a son of God, and certainly not as God himself. Her words felt strange. Wrong. Yet they were filled with something I couldn't explain, like truth carried on the wind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about her calm voice. The cross. The love she spoke of. I had never heard God described like that, not as a father who loved me personally, but as a master I must obey. The next day, I asked more. "Elena, how can God have a son? Doesn't that make him human?" She smiled. "It's not that God became human like us, Amira. It's that he stepped into our world through Jesus, out of love, to bring us back to him. He didn't lose his power. He showed his heart." Her answer unsettled me. But I couldn't stop myself. Every day, I asked more, quietly, discreetly. Elena never pushed. She never preached. But she answered, always with a calm patience that made my guarded heart feel seen. One afternoon, we were painting again. I asked her, "Why do you believe Jesus is different?" She looked into my eyes. "Because he's alive, Amira. Not just in stories. Not just in heaven. But now. Here. With us." I didn't understand it. But I felt something in her words. Like an invitation, gently pulling at something buried deep inside me. Eventually, my questions reached the ears of one of the senior palace staff, a distant aunt who oversaw religious matters in our household. I was summoned quietly, and warned sternly. "You must not ask such things again," she said, her tone sharp. "This woman, this foreigner, she speaks poison. Her faith is a deception." I nodded, heart pounding. My hands trembled as I walked back to my quarters. I should have been frightened. But I wasn't. I was angry, confused, and curious. That night, I cried as I lay in bed. Not because I was afraid of punishment. But because I had tasted something I couldn't untaste. A glimpse of something more. Then came the dream. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I was standing in a wide, open field. Something I had never seen in real life, only in paintings. The sky was soft and golden, and the air felt warm with peace. Ahead of me, a man stood in white, radiant, not with fire, but with light. Not like the brightness of the sun, but a light that came from within him. He called me by a name I had never heard before, Christabel. His voice was not loud. It was gentle, yet it thundered in my soul. I stepped forward. "Who are you?" I asked. He extended his hand. "I am the light you've been seeking," he said. "Come and walk in truth." And then I woke up. My heart was racing. I was sweating. Tears were on my face. And the name Christabel rang in my ears like a song I'd never heard but somehow remembered. I didn't know it yet, but that dream marked the beginning of the end, for the old me. The princess. The obedient daughter. The guarded believer. From that moment on, I began to seek, not just Elena's answers, but Jesus himself. The dream haunted me in a way nothing else ever had. I tried to forget it, to reason it away as a figment of imagination, a reaction to the confusing feeling swirling within me since meeting Elena. But the name Christabel stayed with me. It echoed in my mind when I awoke and whispered to me during prayer. It felt as though something had been awakened, and I couldn't close my eyes to it anymore. I found myself staring at Elena the next day, waiting for the right moment, unsure of whether I would speak or stay silent. She must have sensed it, because as soon as our lesson began, she gently asked, "You look troubled. Would you like to talk?" I hesitated, then whispered, "I had another dream." I told her everything. I told her about the man in white, the name, the peace I felt in his presence. I expected her to question me, to doubt it. But instead, she smiled softly and said, "That was Jesus, Amira. He's calling you by a new name. It's not just a dream. It's an invitation." I felt like the world had turned upside down. Over the next few weeks, I began asking her more, whenever we were alone and no one could overhear. Questions that I once feared even thinking. Who is Jesus really? Why would he die? What makes him different? What happens to those who follow him? Each answer stirred something in me. She told me of grace. Of forgiveness. Of love that doesn't have to be earned. It was so different from the faith I'd known, where fear kept us in line, and shame was a constant shadow. One day, after looking over my shoulder at least 3 times, Elena handed me something. A book, wrapped in an old poetry cover. "It's a Bible," she whispered. "Start with the book of John. Take your time. Read in secret. Let the words speak." My hands trembled as I held it. I knew what would happen if I were caught. Not only would she be expelled, or worse, but I would be disgraced, disowned, possibly imprisoned. But something in me didn't care. Or maybe I just cared more about knowing the truth. That night, in the privacy of my room, I opened the book. I read slowly, afraid to be caught, afraid even of the words themselves. But as I read, something incredible happened. I felt calm. The kind of calm I had never known during long hours of ritual prayers or memorizing the Quran. I read about Jesus healing the broken, speaking to women, embracing children, touching the untouchable, dining with sinners. Every page whispered love. Every verse brought me closer to a man I had never known but felt I belonged to. Still, the fear didn't leave. Each time I read, I checked the door a dozen times. I buried the Bible under layers of clothes. I lived with a constant weight on my chest, fear of hell for betraying my religion, and fear of losing my soul if I turned away from this newfound truth. There were moments I couldn't sleep, moments I cried silently under my blankets, begging God to show me the way. Was I being deceived? Or had I been blind all along? One evening, after reading the story of the woman caught in adultery, how Jesus forgave her when others wanted her stoned, I broke down in tears. If this is who you really are, I whispered, I want to know you. I want to belong to you. That night, he came again. In the dream, I stood in a place of darkness. Fear surrounded me, voices of shame and threats echoing from every side. But then light poured in from above. And there he was again, Jesus, the man in white. His eyes met mine, full of compassion and power. He said just 3 words, "You are mine. Follow me." When I woke, I knew it wasn't just a dream. It was a calling. A choice. One that would change my life forever. I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet, but deep in my heart, I already had. I was no longer just Amira, the princess of an earthly kingdom. I was becoming Christabel, the daughter of the King of Heaven. And nothing would ever be the same. One fateful quiet evening, long after the palace had fallen asleep. The golden halls outside were still, the only sound was the distant hum of the desert wind whispering through the high walls. I knelt in my private prayer room, the same room where I had spent years repeating ritual prayers, dutiful, memorized, and emotionless. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't following tradition. I wasn't reciting Arabic verses. Tonight, I spoke from the rawest place in my soul. With the little Bible opened before me and tears in my eyes, I whispered the words I could barely believe were mine. Jesus, if you are truly the Son of God, if you truly love me the way you say you do, then I give you my life. I don't know what happens next, but I trust you. I want to follow you. The moment the words left my lips, I felt something shift in the room. It was as if a weight lifted off my shoulders, something I hadn't even known was pressing down on me. A wave of peace, thick and overwhelming, filled me from the inside out. My hands trembled, but my heart was still. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was hiding from God. I felt like I had been found. And just like that, I knew, Amira was no longer the name that held my identity. In that moment, deep within my heart, I became Christabel. The name Jesus called me in my dreams. It meant beautiful follower of Christ to me, a name born not from royalty or bloodlines, but from the divine grace I had just stepped into. The following days became a strange mixture of deep joy and deep fear. I began writing letters to Jesus, simple, honest prayers, folding the pages and hiding them under the lining of an old jewelry box. I told him everything, my fears, my questions, my gratitude, my longing to know him more. And every night, I read the Gospels with a hunger I never knew I had. I saw Jesus walk the earth, touch the untouchable, break the rules of shame. His words became my refuge. The dreams continued too. But now, they were brighter, more vivid. I saw him walking beside me in fields of gold, touching broken bodies that were instantly healed. I heard him speak peace over stormy seas and whisper comfort into my fears. One night, I dreamed I was holding a glowing light in my hands. It pulsed gently, warmly, and Jesus stood beside me and said, "Do not hide the light I've given you." But in the waking world, reality was harsh. I lived under constant risk. If anyone found the Bible or saw the notes I wrote, if they even suspected my shift in faith, the consequences would be unbearable. In my culture, turning away from Islam wasn't just frowned upon, it was betrayal. Apostasy could lead to exile, even death. I was the daughter of an emir. I bore the name of a powerful house. My actions reflected not just on myself, but on the entire family. So I lived a double life. By day, I wore the veil, repeated the prayers, walked the marble halls with the quiet grace expected of me. But by night, I became Christabel, praying in secret, weeping in love, rejoicing in a God who had met me in the shadows. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And it was only the beginning. The days following my secret decision to follow Christ were filled with a delicate tension I could no longer hide. I tried to maintain the motions, reciting my daily prayers, attending the Quran classes with the sheikh, fulfilling my duties as the emir's daughter, but something in me had changed. The old rituals felt hollow now, like echoes in a space that had been filled with something far greater. I wasn't rebellious, but I was distant. Detached. My heart had already left the palace long before my body ever would. My mother noticed it first. Her loving but sharp eyes would linger on me during prayers. My hands trembled more than usual. I forgot verses I had memorized since childhood. I no longer asked to go to the mosque. Then one day, I didn't respond when she praised a harsh judgment issued by a local cleric. That silence spoke louder than any words. But it wasn't my family who uncovered the truth, it was a maid. A quiet woman who had served us since I was a child. One afternoon, she came into my room to tidy up while I was away in the courtyard. She lifted the lining of my old jewelry box, perhaps by accident, or perhaps led by suspicion. There, she found them, my letters to Jesus, hidden beneath velvet and gold. She didn't confront me directly. She went straight to my father. I will never forget the sound of his voice that evening. His fury didn't need to be shouted, it was cold, thunderous, and deadly calm. He summoned me to his private chamber. His eyes, once filled with paternal pride, now burned with betrayal. "You brought shame to this house," he said, the words slicing through me. "You, my daughter, turning from the faith of your ancestors? What evil has entered your heart?" I tried to speak. I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell him about the peace, the dreams, the love I had found. But he didn't want to hear. To him, I had dishonored everything, our faith, our family name, our bloodline. He warned that if this madness continued, I would no longer be welcome in the home I was born into. That night, I knew I had no choice. If I stayed, I would be imprisoned either behind physical walls or within a life that no longer belonged to me. I reached out in desperation to the one person I knew would understand, my tutor. The woman who had quietly planted the seed of Christ in my soul. To my amazement, she had already prepared. She told me she had sensed the day would come, and through quiet connections with a small network of underground believers, she had a way out. We made no plans on paper. Everything was whispered, memorized, and carried in our hearts. Timing was everything. I would need to leave after the last evening prayer, when the palace was dim and the guards changed shifts. The night of my escape was cloaked in silence. I wore a plain black abaya and niqab, indistinguishable from any servant. I left behind every symbol of my old life. The jeweled rings, the golden pins, the silk robes. Even my official identity. Everything I had ever known was sealed behind me when the side door of the palace closed with a quiet click. A car was waiting. Inside, a man I didn't know whispered a prayer in the name of Jesus as we drove into the desert night. My tutor was with me, holding my trembling hand. She kept repeating the words, "He will never leave you. He will never forsake you." I looked out the window as the lights of the palace faded behind me. I thought of my mother, of my father, of the little girl who had once believed her world would always be within those walls. I thought of Amira. But I wasn't Amira anymore. I was Christabel. The day I stepped off the plane, the air felt different, crisp, cold, and full of a strange kind of freedom. I was no longer in the land of sand and secrets. I had arrived in the West, a place where I could finally breathe without fear. But it wasn't just geography that had changed. I was no longer Princess Amira. That title was gone, left behind like a crown in the desert. Now, I was Christabel, a name first spoken to me by Jesus in a dream, and now written forever on my heart. Life wasn't easy at first. I had no wealth, no royal titles, no family name to open doors. But I had something I never truly had before: peace. A new family welcomed me, a small, faithful church community that had heard my story through my tutor, who had also relocated. For the first time in my life, I walked into a building of worship not because I was forced to, but because I wanted to. And on a bright Sunday morning, dressed in a simple white robe, I was baptized in front of believers who had become brothers and sisters to me. As I emerged from the water, I felt it, the old life washed away, the fear drowned, the shame buried. I was not the disgraced daughter of an emir. I was a daughter of the Most High God. In the years that followed, I began to share my story. Quietly at first, then more boldly. Churches invited me to speak. Women from strict religious backgrounds found courage in my journey. I started a small group for former Muslims in hiding, some who had fled violence, others who were still living in fear, hiding their Bibles under floorboards like I once did. I listened to them. I wept with them. I prayed with them. And through it all, I kept remembering what Jesus told me in that dream: "You are mine." Now, I speak not just as a former princess, but as a witness of grace. A woman who lost everything, her family, her country, her past. But found the one thing that can never be taken away. I lost everything the world could give me: status, comfort, even my name. But in Jesus, I found everything my soul ever needed. I found love without condition, truth without fear, and life without end. I am Christabel. I am free. My story is not just about leaving a palace, it's about stepping into a kingdom that never fades. My courage, faith, and freedom are possible because of the love of Jesus Christ. And that love is available to you. If my testimony touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment to let me know how this story moved you. And if you're searching for peace like I was, don't wait. Open your heart today.
If you found this story moving, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful testimonies.